The Argonaut had no business being there. That much was clear to the Varkish military, who, even after scanning the wreckage, couldn't quite explain how the unassuming human vessel had become the center of such chaos. Varkis Prime, a strategically critical system for the Krill, had long been considered an invulnerable stronghold. A dozen fleets, including 2 Varkish dreadnoughts, had been dispatched to secure the system, hoping to quell a minor conflict between the Varkish and their allies, the Krumtar. But those fleets were reduced to scrap by the time the human ship finally left the region. Captain Elias Harper, a veteran of the human navy, had been aboard the Argonaut, a stripped-down cruiser with minimal weapons, designed for reconnaissance missions. Yet it was Harper's tactics that had transformed the vessel into something far more lethal than its design intended. The Varkish, relying on their traditional overwhelming force, found themselves systematically outmaneuvered at every turn. Harper didn't need advanced weaponry. He needed only his crew's ability to think, adapt, and strike at the most unexpected moment. The Varkish fleet had expected to engage in a few hours of calculated bombardment. Instead, they spent the next 3 days chasing shadows, dealing with hit-and-run tactics, their fleets scattered across the system's moons and asteroid fields. The Argonaut didn't just destroy their ships, it confused, isolated, and psychologically shattered their commanders. It was a war of attrition that none of the galaxy's older species had ever seen. When the Varkish finally retreated, they left behind more than just broken ships. They left a galaxy-wide message: never underestimate humanity. And as word of the Argonaut's battle spread across the stars, a new, more terrifying question began to circulate. What other surprises did humanity have in store? The Council had no answers, but they were already making plans to find out. Ambassador Clore of the Zoroth had never known fear, not real fear. His species, capable of reading minds and manipulating the environment through psychic force, had ruled the galaxy for eons. They saw themselves as superior, evolved beyond the need for war, beyond violence. To them, physical strength was a quaint relic of a less enlightened time. But now, standing on the edge of a barren human colony world, Clore couldn't shake the growing unease gnawing at him. He had come to Earth's colonies to observe, to understand the species that had begun to make waves in galactic politics. The humans had been given a small advisory seat on the Galactic Council, a gesture meant to placate them, to show they were welcome. But there were whispers of humanity's violent potential, and Clore had been dispatched to investigate the truth. On a desolate training field, he witnessed a sight that would forever haunt him. A platoon of human soldiers, young men and women no older than 20, were engaged in mock combat with live ammunition and heavily armored drones. The drones, built to simulate the most advanced alien combat tactics, were systematically torn apart, not through superior firepower, but through something far more terrifying: human ingenuity and ruthlessness. The soldiers used the terrain, rubble, sandstorms, and even the bodies of their fallen comrades to outsmart their opponents in ways Clore had never seen. It wasn't the violence that struck him the hardest. It was the attitude behind it. The humans weren't simply fighting to win. They were fighting to dominate, to break their enemies in every possible way. In a coordinated move, a soldier named Lieutenant Rachel Ward disabled a drone by using its own technology against it, hacking into its programming, and turning its weapons on itself. "We fight to make sure no one gets up again," Ward said, her voice flat, as she wiped her brow. "We're not here to negotiate. We're here to win." Clore's psychic shields couldn't block the image of that brutal finality. He had no doubt now. Humanity was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. Back aboard his ship, Clore tried to warn his superiors, but he knew it was already too late. Humanity was not just a threat. They were the galaxy's nightmare come to life. The Kruntar warlord Jorath had always prided himself on his ability to anticipate the moves of his enemies. His fleet, a monstrous collection of heavily armed dreadnoughts and cruisers, had crushed smaller, weaker species with terrifying efficiency. But when he set his sights on the Gyros system, a small but strategically important human colony, he expected a swift conquest, one that would send a message to the rest of the galaxy. What Jorath didn't expect was the arrival of Captain Michael "Mike" Grant and his ragtag fleet of human ships. They were nothing more than civilian vessels retrofitted with basic weaponry, hastily assembled from the nearby colonies. No one had expected much from them, least of all the Kruntar, who laughed at the idea of such a pitiful force standing in their way. But Grant was a different kind of commander. A former Marine, he had fought in countless battles, and understood that true victory didn't always come from the biggest guns or the most advanced technology. It came from knowing how to outthink your opponent. The humans had no intention of meeting the Kruntar head-on. They were going to make the Kruntar fight on their terms. The battle began in typical fashion, with the Kruntar fleet barreling toward Gyros. But as soon as they entered the system, everything went wrong. A human scout ship lodged a handful of decoy probes, disrupting the Kruntar's targeting systems. In the chaos, the Kruntar found themselves trapped in a deadly web of coordinated attacks. Human ships, seemingly scattered and disorganized, suddenly appeared from hidden positions, raining fire down on the Kruntar's flanks. Grant's strategy was simple but brilliant: force the Kruntar to expend all their energy in useless, disorganized pursuit, while the humans focused on tactical sabotage. He used the asteroid belts around Gyros moons to mask his movements, making the Kruntar's superior weapons useless in the cluttered terrain. By the time Jorath realized what was happening, his fleet was in tatters. His ships, designed for all-out destruction, were now easy prey for the humans' guerrilla tactics. The Kruntar fleet was in ruins within a week, and Grant's forces had barely broken a sweat. Jorath's final transmission was brief. "This isn't over. You cannot win a war with tricks." Grant's reply, calm and decisive, echoed across the battlefield. "We didn't start this war, but we'll finish it on our terms." The galaxy now knew the truth. Humanity wasn't just a force to be reckoned with. They were an unpredictable storm that couldn't be stopped. And the Kruntar were just the first to feel its wrath. As the weeks passed following the Battle of Gyros, the galaxy's most powerful species began to look at humanity with increasing unease. What they'd assumed were mere flukes, strange victories born from luck or chaos, were beginning to look like something else entirely. The Kruntar, still reeling from their defeat, quietly requested a summit with the Terrakan, the oldest and most respected race in the galaxy. What they sought was not an alliance, but an understanding. What were the humans? The Terrakan, known for their sagacity and long-standing rule, had not been as dismissive of humanity as the other species. While the galaxy's council members had indulged in petty squabbles, the Terrakan watched the humans closely, tracking their movements, their behavior, and their rise to power. And what they found was deeply unsettling. In the Terrakan archives, buried in records no one dared to touch, there was a reference to an ancient war, a war fought on a small, insignificant world called Earth. The humans, in their distant past, had fought against themselves for centuries, a species locked in a brutal, unrelenting conflict. But it wasn't the scale of the violence that caught the Terrakan's attention. It was the resilience of the human spirit. Unlike any species they had encountered, humanity didn't break under pressure. They adapted, evolved, and found new ways to fight. A council of Terracan scientists was convened, and they began to probe deeper into humanity's history. They discovered that human violence, far from being a flaw, was a feature of their evolution. Every war, every famine, every plague had refined humanity's ability to survive, to thrive in chaos. Their technological leaps were not born from peaceful contemplation, but from conflict. They had learned to outthink their enemies, to survive impossible odds, and even to embrace the fight. It was a terrifying revelation. Humanity didn't just survive in the galaxy, they were built for it. The Terracan Council members gathered in silence. "If what we are seeing is true," one of the elders spoke, "then we are dealing with a species that can never be reasoned with. They are not here to coexist. They are here to dominate." And with that, the galaxy's fate began to shift. The age of humanity's rise was no longer a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The Galactic Council, once a bastion of cooperation among the galaxy's most advanced species, was unraveling. The peacekeepers, diplomats, and strategists who had shaped the course of galactic history now found themselves paralyzed by a single terrifying question. What do we do with humanity? The Zorath, the Krill, the Draxes, all the factions that had long dominated the stars, now found themselves scrambling. One by one, they had sent their spies, their scholars, their best and brightest to study the humans, but each report came back with the same unsettling conclusion. Humanity was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They weren't just another species. They were a threat. And worse, a wild card. There was no predicting what humanity would do next, no calculating the consequences of their unpredictable nature. The old methods, trade agreements, treaties, diplomacy, seemed meaningless in the face of a species that didn't care for rules. At the heart of the Council's panic was a growing sense of powerlessness. Even the Terracan, once considered invincible due to their long lifespan and mastery over psychic forces, had fallen short in their attempts to counter humanity's unconventional strategies. Their soldiers, trained in centuries-old techniques, their minds honed to an almost superhuman edge, were outsmarted and outflanked by human guerrilla tactics. Their fleets, powerful and intimidating, were rendered ineffective in the face of human unpredictability. It wasn't that the Terracan were weak. It was that the humans fought without the same constraints of honor, tradition, or expectation. For the first time in history, the galaxy's greatest minds had no answer. "We cannot keep allowing this to go unchecked," said Ambassador Arnius, a Krill diplomat who had seen his species' fleets decimated by the Argonaut and the Gyros engagements. "Humanity does not seek balance. They seek total domination." In a secret, emergency meeting, the Council's leaders discussed their options, and the decision was made. The galaxy must prepare for war with humanity. We will unite to crush them before they grow any stronger. But deep down, they all knew the truth. No one had the stomach for a war against a species that didn't just fight to survive. Humanity fought to win, and it wasn't clear that any of them had the strength to stop them. As the meeting adjourned, the dark reality set in. If humanity wanted war, they would give it to them. And yet, deep in the back of each leader's mind, a chilling thought lingered. Could they win? The Terracan had always believed themselves the galaxy's natural rulers. With their psychic powers, their centuries of wisdom, and their unmatched ability to manipulate the fabric of space itself, they had lived above the petty struggles of other species. They were not a race driven by hunger or greed. They had no need for the violent expansion that characterized lesser civilizations. Instead, they considered themselves the guardians of galactic order, guiding the lesser species toward enlightenment. But all that had changed when humanity entered the scene. For the first time in millennia, the Terracan were confronted by something they couldn't control. After the Battle of Geros, the Terracan took their warnings seriously. They'd underestimated humanity's unpredictability, but they were still convinced that their centuries-old dominance in the galaxy would protect them. They were wrong. It began with an innocuous request. Captain Michael Grant, fresh from his victory over the Kromtar, sent a diplomatic envoy to Terracan space. The message was simple. We wish to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Let's talk. The Terracan, dismissing humanity as mere children playing at war, agreed to meet. What they didn't expect was that the diplomatic envoy would be a Trojan horse, a trick, a diversion. When the Terracan flagship, the Zarek, entered orbit around a distant world in the Terracan home system, it was met by a fleet of human warships, hidden in plain sight. The fleet didn't just carry guns, they carried intelligence on every psychic vulnerability the Terracan had, their power grids, their weaknesses. The humans knew the Terracan inside and out, and they weren't interested in negotiations. The battle was swift and brutal. The Terracan tried to use their psychic powers to disrupt human systems, but it was as if their attacks simply bounced off an invisible barrier. Unknown to the Terracan, humanity had spent years developing technology specifically designed to counter psychic warfare. Their fleets were equipped with neural dampeners, devices that nullified the Terracan's ability to manipulate minds or control matter. The Terracan fought valiantly, but their methods were obsolete in the face of human innovation. Within hours, their flagship was in flames, and the Terracan fleet was in disarray. By the time they could regroup, the human forces had already landed on their homeworld. The Terracan Emperor Rok, a being whose psychic powers were the stuff of legend, met with Grant in a final, desperate attempt to salvage peace. "Do you understand what you've done?" Emperor Rake hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and fear. "You have destroyed the heart of the galaxy's order." Grant stood motionless, his gaze cold. "No, Rok. We've merely removed an obstacle." The Terracan were broken. Their ancient empire shattered, their people left in disarray. It was a message to the galaxy. Humanity would no longer be denied. The once proud Terracan were now a footnote in history, and the galaxy would never forget who had brought them to their knees. The Terracan had fallen, their ancient empire brought to ruin in a matter of days. The entire galaxy now knew that humanity was a force capable of reshaping the balance of power with terrifying speed. For the first time in history, the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy had been toppled, and not by a larger, stronger force, but by a species whose strength lay in something far more dangerous: unpredictability. In the wake of the Terracan defeat, a desperate coalition formed, made up of the galaxy's most influential powers: the Zoroth, the Krill, the Draxes, and the Varkish. These species had no choice but to unite, pooling their resources, knowledge, and fleets in an attempt to confront the unstoppable human juggernaut. What had once been petty rivalries now gave way to a single, unified goal: stop humanity before they could consolidate their power and turn the entire galaxy into their dominion. But the leaders of this fragile alliance knew the odds were slim. The humans had already demonstrated a unique ability to defy expectations. Every time they were cornered, they found a way out. Every time they were underestimated, they delivered a crushing blow. In secret war rooms, generals from across the galaxy debated their strategy. It became clear that the humans couldn't be defeated in a conventional battle. They didn't fight by the same rules, didn't think in the same ways. To defeat them, the Alliance would have to create a trap, one so elaborate, so airtight, that even humanity's resourcefulness couldn't escape it. And so, the plan was born. lure the humans into a trap of their own making in the empty space of the Cerberus Nebula, a region known for its dense clouds and extreme gravitational anomalies. The Alliance would hide their fleets within the nebula's deadly obscurity, waiting for humanity's inevitable attack. The Krill would deploy their most advanced psychic weaponry to disrupt human sensors, and the Zoroth would engage in the brutal telepathic assaults that had so often crushed their foes in the past. As the coalition ships assembled in the nebula, the tension was palpable. This was their last shot. They had to end the human threat here, now. But the question remained, would humanity fall into their trap, or would they find a way to turn the tables once again? The galaxy held its breath, knowing that the outcome of this battle would determine the future of every civilization in the stars. And deep in the heart of the nebula, humanity was already preparing, because once again they had no intention of being caught by surprise. The Cerberus Nebula was a graveyard of broken stars, a place where even the most seasoned navigators hesitated to venture. Its dense clouds of gas and dust distorted sensors, and its erratic gravitational anomalies were enough to tear apart the largest ships. It was the perfect place for a trap, dark, foreboding, and deadly. The Alliance believed they had the upper hand. They had studied humanity's tactics and knew the humans would come. They would be lured in, one by one, until the combined fleets of the galaxy descended on them like a hammer. But they never anticipated what would happen next. As the first human warships entered the nebula, everything seemed as the Alliance had predicted. The Manticore, Argonaut, and several other vessels, each a symbol of humanity's ingenuity, moved cautiously through the nebula's fog, their sensors scrambled by the Zoroth's psychic distortions. The fleets of the Alliance lay hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, as the human ships ventured deeper into the nebula, the Alliance sprang their trap. For a brief moment, the human forces seemed disoriented. Their ships scattered, their command channels filled with static, their weapons offline. It was working. The Zoroth's telepathic waves were pushing against human minds, their psychic storms ripping apart any coordinated response. But then, humanity did what it did best. They adapted. Instead of retreating, instead of panicking, the humans deployed a countermeasure the Alliance had never seen. Each human ship was equipped with a new type of technology, an advanced disruption field that rendered all psychic interference null. The Zoroth's telepathic powers shattered against it, harmless. And then came the human tactics. Where the Alliance had hoped to isolate the humans, they instead found themselves divided and disoriented. The human ships began coordinating flawlessly, as if the chaos of the nebula had become their natural environment. They moved like predators in a storm, precise, brutal, and relentless. In less than a day, the fleet of the Alliance had disintegrated. The Krill, the Varkish, the Zorath, all were forced into retreat, their ships crippled or destroyed. The Terrakan had fallen. The Alliance had fallen. Humanity stood victorious. As the last remnants of the galaxy's once proud fleets limped away from the nebula, Captain Michael Grant stood on the bridge of the Manticore, looking out at the stars. "Prepare for the next phase," he said, his voice calm. "The galaxy is ours now." Humanity had ascended, not just as conquerors, but as the undisputed rulers of the stars. The old powers were fractured, their ancient reigns shattered. The galaxy would never be the same. And humanity's dominion had only just begun.